Marcus Webb's hands moved without thought, the way a decade of muscle memory allows. Grease lined the creases of his knuckles, dark and permanent, no matter how many times he scrubbed with the pumice soap sitting cracked on the shop steel sink. The bay smelled of cold concrete and hydraulic fluid. A single fluorescent tube flickered overhead, buzzing faintly against the afternoon quiet. He knelt beside a sedan with its hood propped open, listening, not looking, listening, to a misfire most mechanics would chase for hours. His head tilted a fraction. Cylinder 3. He didn't need the diagnostic tool resting untouched on the cart beside him. Outside, tires crunched gravel. A black SUV, too clean for this part of town, pulled to the far edge of the lot and idled. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag threadbare at the corners and straightened, glancing once toward the window before returning to the engine bay. Not his concern. Cars like that didn't come here for oil changes. The driver's door opened. Then the rear door, smaller, hesitant. A child's sneaker touched pavement, followed by silence, followed by a woman's voice, clipped and distracted, already turning back toward her phone. Marcus didn't look up again. But something in him, old, familiar, quiet, noticed anyway. The girl stood at the edge of the lot like she'd been left there on purpose. 6, maybe 7. A stiff wool coat too formal for a garage, buttoned to the collar. She didn't wander, didn't fidget the way children usually did in unfamiliar places. She just stood, arms folded tight across her middle, eyes tracking the SUV as it pulled away without her. Marcus caught the movement in his peripheral vision, the way she watched the vehicle leave rather than watched where she was. That told him something. He went back to the sedan, telling himself it wasn't his business. The woman on the phone, an assistant, judging by the clipped efficiency in her voice, not a mother, gestured vaguely toward the waiting area bench without breaking her call. Car trouble, they said an hour, just, sit, okay? I have to take this. She didn't wait for a response. She walked toward the far corner of the lot, phone pressed to her ear, already somewhere else entirely. The girl sat. Knees together, hands folded in her lap, spine straight, posture trained into her rather than natural. She stared at the concrete floor. Marcus worked another 10 minutes before the silence started to itch at him. He'd raised a daughter once. He knew the particular stillness of a child who had learned not to ask for things. He didn't approach her. Instead, he reached into the tin box on his workbench, old washers, a bent socket, a small wooden toy he'd carved years ago and never quite gotten rid of, a little wolf, unfinished on one side. He set it on the bench near her without a word, then turned back to the engine. 5 minutes passed. Then the scrape of small sneakers on concrete, cautious, testing. She picked up the wolf. Turned it over in her hands. Studied the unfinished side like she was solving something. You didn't finish it, she said. Not a question. No, Marcus said, not looking over. Some things you leave be for a while. She considered that with a seriousness that didn't belong on a face that young. Then she sat down on the overturned crate beside his workbench, close enough to watch his hands, and said nothing else. Marcus kept working. But he noticed, the way he noticed engine trouble before the gauges did, that something in the girl had gone quiet in a different way now. Less braced. Still watching him, though, the way people watch something they haven't decided to trust yet. An hour stretched into 2. Marcus didn't mind. The sedan's owner hadn't come back yet either, and the girl, she still hadn't offered her name, had taken to sitting cross-legged on the crate, watching him work with an attention most adults didn't bother giving anything. That's a torque wrench, she said, pointing. Marcus glanced over, surprised despite himself. That's right. My driver has one. He said it's for bolts that matter. She said it plainly, like reciting a fact, but something flickered behind her eyes, pride, maybe, or just the pleasure of being right about something. Marcus filed that detail away without comment. My driver. Not our driver. Not my dad's driver. The distinction sat there, small and telling, the way a hairline crack tells you more about a block than the whole engine sometimes does. The assistant reappeared near the office door, still on her phone, waving a hand toward the girl without making eye contact, a gesture that meant stay put, not come here. She disappeared again toward the parking lot. The girl's shoulders dropped, just slightly, before she caught herself and straightened them back up. Is your mom running late? Marcus asked, keeping his voice even, unremarkable, the same tone he'd use asking about a car's mileage. My mom's in Geneva. The girl said it the way she might say my mom is at the store, flat, rehearsed, a fact worn smooth from repetition. My dad's building's on the news a lot. Marcus didn't ask which building. He didn't need to. There was only one name in this county that made assistants speak in that clipped, walking-on-glass tone, only one family whose SUVs were detailed clean enough to embarrass a car wash. He wiped his hands slowly on the rag, giving himself a second longer than necessary. Somewhere behind his ribs, an old door he'd bolted shut a long time ago creaked, just slightly, on its hinge. He knew that name. Knew it better than anyone in this town would believe, looking at his grease-stained coveralls and the faded shop patch stitched crooked over his heart. He said nothing about it. Just picked up his wrench again. What's your name? He asked instead. Sophie, she said. Then, after a pause that seemed to cost her something, what's yours? Marcus. Sophie nodded, like she was filing it away too, the way she'd filed away torque wrench and bolts that matter. The SUV returned faster than expected, barely 90 minutes, not the hour Marcus had quietly guessed the sedan's owner would take. This one was different from the first, longer, darker, the kind of vehicle that didn't so much park as arrive. Sophie's whole posture changed before the door even opened. Spine straighter. Hands folded back into her lap. The wolf carving disappeared into her coat pocket, tucked away fast, like something she wasn't supposed to have found. A man stepped out, mid-40s, suit sharp enough to have never seen a wrinkle, phone already in hand though he wasn't speaking into it. Richard Calloway. Marcus knew the face from billboards downtown, from the business section nobody in this shop bothered reading. He didn't know the man. But he knew men like him. Calloway crossed the lot without looking at the shop itself, not the bay doors, not the hand-lettered sign, not Marcus. His eyes found Sophie and softened for exactly 1 second before smoothing back into practiced composure. Sophie. Car's fixed. Let's go, sweetheart, I've got a call in 20 minutes. Sophie slid off the crate. She glanced back once, not at the shop, not at the sedan, at Marcus, and there was something in the look he recognized from his own daughter, years ago, when leaving somewhere she hadn't wanted to leave. Bye, Marcus, she said quietly. Calloway's head turned at that, finally registering the shop's interior, the man in stained coveralls standing near the workbench. His gaze moved over Marcus in the brief, efficient way of someone accustomed to sizing up strangers for risk and nothing else. Not hostile. Just dismissive. A glance that catalogued and discarded in the same motion. Sorry if she bothered you, Calloway said, already steering Sophie by the shoulder toward the SUV. It wasn't really addressed to Marcus. It was the kind of apology offered to furniture. She didn't, Marcus said. Calloway didn't seem to hear him. The door shut. The SUV pulled away, clean and quiet, leaving only the smell of exhaust and the hollow quiet it always left behind. Marcus stood there a moment, rag still in hand, looking at the empty space where the wolf carving had sat 2 hours ago. The shop closed at 6. Marcus stayed later than usual, running a rag over tools that didn't need cleaning, the kind of task a man gives himself when his hands need something to do and his mind won't cooperate otherwise. Danny, the shop's owner, leaned in the doorway of the office, keys already jingling in his hand. You good, man? You've been quiet since that Calloway car left. I'm fine. Marcus set the wrench back in its slot, careful, deliberate. just thinking. That guy's a piece of work. Whole town knows it. Callaway Group's been buying up half the old industrial park downtown, including that stretch by the river. Danny shook his head. Guy doesn't even look at people when he talks to them. Kid seemed sweet, though. Shame. Marcus said nothing. He'd learned a long time ago that silence cost less than the truth did. He drove home in his 15-year-old pickup, windows cracked despite the evening chill, letting the wind do what it always did, clear his head enough to get through the door of his own house. The porch light was out again. He'd meant to fix it for 3 weeks. Inside, the house held the particular stillness of a place built for 2 people and now holding 1. A photo on the hallway table, his late wife, Elena, laughing at something out of frame, a photo he still hadn't found the will to move. His daughter's old bedroom door stayed shut most nights now that she was grown and out of state, chasing her own life the way he'd always hoped she would. He sat at the kitchen table without turning on the overhead light, just the one lamp by the window, and pulled a battered folder from the bottom drawer, the kind of drawer a man keeps for things he isn't ready to throw away but isn't ready to look at either. He didn't open it. He just set his hand flat against the cover for a long moment, the way you'd rest a hand on an old engine block to feel if it still had heat in it. Then he put it back, closed the drawer, and turned off the lamp. A week passed before the SUV showed up again, not the sedan this time, and not for a repair. Sophie climbed out before the driver had even fully stopped, the kind of urgency that only children move with, and the assistant trailing behind her looked more resigned than surprised. She insisted, the assistant said, by way of explanation, already checking her phone. Mr. Callaway has back-to-back meetings. I have an hour if is that all right? Marcus set down the brake line he'd been bleeding. It's all right. Sophie didn't wait for permission. She crossed straight to the workbench and pulled the wolf carving from her coat pocket. She'd kept it, he realized, carried it around all week like it belonged to her now, and set it down like she was picking up a conversation exactly where they'd left it. You still didn't finish it, she said. Some things take a while, Marcus said again, and this time she almost smiled, like she recognized the answer as a kind of ritual between them rather than a real excuse. She watched him work in silence for a while, swinging her legs from the crate, and then, without looking up, she said, My dad said you probably used to fix trucks in the army or something. Because of how you stand. Marcus's hand stilled for half a second over the brake line, barely noticeable, but there. Your dad said that? He said it like a joke. To Ms. Prentice. Sophie shrugged, the gesture of someone repeating something without fully understanding its weight. But I don't think it's a joke. You stand like Grandpa Joe used to. He was in the Navy. Marcus resumed his work, keeping his voice light. Lot of men stand a certain way. Doesn't mean much. But it did mean something, and the fact that Callaway had noticed at all, had clocked something in his posture worth mentioning, even as a throwaway joke, settled into Marcus's chest like a stone dropped into still water. Rings spreading outward, slow, silent, but spreading all the same. Sophie went back to turning the wolf over in her hands, oblivious to the current she'd just stirred. Marcus said nothing else. But some part of him, old and buried, had just been seen, if only for a second, if only by accident. The visits became something neither of them named out loud. Once, sometimes twice a week, the SUV would idle at the edge of the lot, and Sophie would cross the gravel like she was arriving somewhere that mattered rather than somewhere she'd been dropped. The assistant, Ms. Prentice, had stopped pretending to ask permission. She'd just nod at Marcus now, a tired, grateful sort of nod, and disappear toward whatever crisis needed her attention that hour. Marcus never asked for it. He told himself that, working the words over like a worn bolt thread, checking if they still held. He hadn't invited this. The girl had simply kept coming, and a man doesn't turn a child away from a workbench for wanting to sit and watch. This time she brought a notebook, pink, corners worn soft from being carried in a backpack that clearly held more important things most days. She opened it to a blank page and set it on her knees. "I'm writing down what things are called," she announced. "So I know them." "That's so. What's that?" She pointed to the long steel bar leaned against the lift. "Breaker bar." She wrote it carefully, tongue between her teeth in concentration, letters a little too large for the lines. "And that?" "Torque wrench." "You already knew that one." "I forgot if it was the same as the breaker bar." She frowned at her own notebook like it had betrayed her, then underlined torque wrench twice, as if daring herself to forget again. Marcus watched her from the corner of his eye, hands still moving over the transmission pan he was draining. There was something in the particular, careful way she catalogued the world, not childish curiosity exactly, but something closer to hunger. A kid collecting facts the way some kids collected rocks. He recognized it because he'd seen it before, in a smaller notebook, decades ago, in handwriting not so different from hers. "You writing all this down for school?" he asked. Sophie shook her head, not looking up. "For me. So I'll know things. Nobody tells me things at home. They just talk over me." She said it without self-pity, a simple fact stated plainly, the way she'd once said "my mom's in Geneva." Marcus's jaw tightened, just slightly, and he said nothing. But he reached over and tapped the breaker bar. "Write down what it's for, too. Not just the name." Sophie looked up at him, really looked, the way people do when someone hands them something they didn't expect to be given, and then bent back over her notebook, pencil moving faster now.